Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes the case for Arab leadership on Gaza. Israel's wider war has U.S. cautioning of strategic defeat. Gaza as a global metaphor for reclaiming justice. Houthis target Israel-linked ships in Red Sea. Here's what you need to know. Global shipping on edge after Houthis attack vessels. The case for Arab leadership on Gaza. Foreign affairs. The recent conflict between Hamas and Israel has led to a shift in the attitudes of Arab states towards Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Prior to the conflict, some Arab states had established diplomatic ties with Israel, while others maintained informal relationships. However, the violence in Gaza has prompted a more unified response from Arab states, with calls for a ceasefire and condemnation of Israel's actions. Despite this seeming unity, each country's approach is driven by its own concerns and priorities. Egypt and Jordan, for example, are anxious about the impact of the conflict on their own security and stability. The UAE, on the other hand, is concerned about threats posed by Iran and its proxies in the region. Qatar, which has a close relationship with Hamas, is trying to maintain its position as a mediator while also appeasing other Arab states and the international community. Saudi Arabia, as the custodian of the Arab Peace Initiative, is focused on preserving its credibility and status in the Arab and Islamic worlds. While each country is pursuing its own interests, there is potential for greater coordination and cooperation among the big five Arab powers: Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. By pooling their resources and coordinating their efforts, these countries could have a better chance of achieving an outcome that benefits them all. This could include relaunching the peace process, containing Hamas through political means, and developing a long-term strategy to counter Iran's regional interventions. The Big Five could also use their leverage with the United States and Israel to shape the post-conflict space and push for a ceasefire and a renewed peace process. The ongoing conflict presents an opportunity for Arab countries to go beyond pragmatic de-escalation with Iran and to push for a more comprehensive strategy to undermine Iran's influence in the region. By working together, the Big Five could amplify their diplomatic gains and contribute to regional stability. Israel's wider war has U.S. cautioning of strategic defeat. Bloomberg. Israel is expanding military operations in southern Gaza, putting at risk hundreds of thousands of Palestinians escaping the north, as U.S. officials grow increasingly uneasy about the war's toll on civilians. Israel's war aims move south with Hamas leadership in crosshairs. Gaza as a global metaphor for reclaiming justice. Al Jazeera. The Israeli assault on Gaza in 2014 can be seen as a metaphor for various forms of oppression and dehumanization, according to Palestinian scholar Yosef Loshitsky. In a paper presented at a conference on international law and the State of Israel, Legitimacy, Responsibility and Exceptionalism, Loshitsky argued that the attacks on Gaza represent a political and cultural turning point. Loshitsky highlighted the ways in which the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza can be seen as a metaphor for a range of other struggles for justice, including the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. The attacks on Gaza can also be seen as a showcase for the Israeli and American arms industry, which benefits from the cycle of violence and destruction in the region. The metaphor of Gaza as a prison or ghetto highlights the ways in which the Israeli state deliberately creates and perpetuates suffering in the region. Houthis target Israel-linked ships in Red Sea. Here's what you need to know. Al Jazeera. The Iran-backed Houthi movement in Yemen has launched attacks against Israel-linked vessels in the Red Sea. The group controls the Yemeni capital Sana'a and has promised more attacks unless Israel and the U.S. put an end to the war on Gaza. 3 commercial vessels were attacked in the Strait, a narrow sea passage that separates the Arabian Peninsula from the Horn of Africa. The USS Carney, a U.S. warship, shot down a drone and responded to distress calls from the ships. The U.S. Central Command said it believes the attacks were enabled by Iran. Global shipping on edge after Houthis attack vessels. Deutsche Welle. Yemeni Houthis seized a Japanese-operated cargo ship in the Red Sea on November 19. The ship, named Galaxy Leader, is owned by a company registered under Isle of Man headquartered Ray Car Carriers, which belongs to Abraham Unger, an Israeli businessman. The incident has been described as an Iranian act of terrorism by Israel, and experts believe that this is part of a tit-for-tat war between the US, UK, and Iran. The Houthis have said that they are actively searching for Israeli vessels in the Red Sea. Saudi bourse eases on falling oil prices, Qatar extends losses. Reuters. Saudi Arabia's stock market ended lower on Monday due to falling oil prices. The Qatari index also extended losses from the previous session. Oil prices have been declining due to investor skepticism over the latest OPEC Plus decision on supply cuts and uncertainty surrounding global fuel demand. Geopolitical considerations were also back in focus as fighting resumed in Gaza and 3 commercial vessels came under attack in the southern Red Sea. The Saudi benchmark index dropped 0.3% and the Qatari benchmark declined 0.8%. Meanwhile, Egypt's blue chip index advanced 2.8%. Live updates: Israel's military calls for more evacuations in southern Gaza as it widens offensive. Associated Press. The Israeli military has extended its ground operation against Hamas to every part of the Gaza Strip. The army resumed its offensive after a week-long ceasefire expired, and has begun targeting southern Gaza in addition to the north. The majority of the population has fled south in search of safety. The Israeli military says it has killed thousands of militants but has not provided any evidence. The health ministry in Gaza says the death toll since October 7 has surpassed 15,500, with over 41,000 wounded. The ministry does not differentiate between civilian and combatant deaths, but says that 70% of the dead are women and children. Other news includes Italy's naval ship receiving its first patient and Vice President Kamala Harris calling the scale of civilian suffering in Gaza devastating. Palestinians face harrowing hunt for safety as war intensifies. Wall Street Journal. Following a temporary ceasefire, Israel has resumed airstrikes on Gaza, forcing Palestinians to decide whether to stay put or continue searching for a safe place within the territory. Over 15,000 people have died in Gaza since October 7, with the UN stating that most victims were women and children. Israel claims it has killed thousands of Hamas fighters. Many Palestinians fear losing their land again, having already been displaced during the Nakba in 1948. Israel has sent millions of voice messages, leaflets and texts to try to minimize civilian casualties during the conflict. WHO board to hold emergency session on Gaza health situation. Reuters. The World Health Organization, WHO, will hold an extraordinary session of its executive board on December 10 to discuss health conditions in Gaza and the West Bank, according to a document from the UN Global Health Agency. The session was convened in response to a request from 14 members of the WHO's board. The meeting will primarily focus on Gaza but will also cover attacks on the health sector in the West Bank. The Palestinian ambassador to the UN in Geneva stated that the aim of the meeting is to empower the WHO and call on Israel to not target the medical sector, in order to allow for the provision of medical supplies. The health sector in Gaza has been severely affected by bombings and a lack of fuel, and only a fraction of Gaza's hospitals are currently operational. Israel investigates possible trading knowledge ahead of October 7 Hamas attack. Reuters. Israeli authorities are investigating allegations of insider trading related to a Hamas attack on Israel on October 7. U.S. researchers found evidence of significant short selling of Israeli securities leading up to the attack, which triggered a war that has been ongoing for nearly 2 months. The researchers discovered that short selling of Israeli securities on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange dramatically increased just before the attack. The Israel Securities Authority confirmed that the matter is under investigation. The researchers suggest that traders who were informed about the upcoming attacks profited from the events. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world. Today, we have a collection of news stories that shed light on the ongoing conflict between Hamas and Israel, as well as the wider implications for the region. Let's dive right in. First, we have an article from Foreign Affairs discussing the shift in attitudes of Arab states towards Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. While each country has its own concerns and priorities, there is potential for greater coordination and cooperation among the Big Five Arab powers. By working together, these countries could achieve an outcome that benefits them all and contributes to regional stability. Next, Bloomberg reports on Israel's expanding military operations in southern Gaza and the growing unease among U.S. officials about the toll on civilians. This highlights the wider war that Israel is engaged in and the cautionary stance of the U.S. towards a potential strategic defeat. Al Jazeera provides a thought-provoking perspective on the Israeli assault on Gaza as a metaphor for various forms of oppression and dehumanization. The suffering of Palestinians in Gaza is compared to other struggles for justice, such as the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. The attacks on Gaza also showcase the Israeli and American arms industry, which benefits from the cycle of violence in the region. Moving on, Al Jazeera reports on the Houthi movement in Yemen targeting Israel-linked ships in the Red Sea. The attacks are seen as a response to the war on Gaza, and the U.S. believes that they were enabled by Iran. This raises concerns about the wider implications of the conflict and the potential for escalation in the region. Deutsche Welle highlights the seizure of a Japanese-operated cargo ship by the Houthis in the Red Sea. This incident, involving an Israeli businessman, is seen as part of a tit-for-tat war between the US, UK, and Iran. The ongoing tensions in the region have put global shipping on edge. Reuters brings our attention to the impact of falling oil prices on Saudi Arabia's stock market, as well as the Qatari index. Geopolitical considerations, including the fighting in Gaza and the attacks on vessels in the Red Sea, have added to the uncertainty surrounding global fuel demand. The Associated Press reports on the Israeli military's extension of its ground operation against Hamas to every part of the Gaza Strip. This has led to more evacuations and an intensification of the conflict. The civilian suffering in Gaza has been described as devastating by Vice President Kamala Harris, highlighting the urgent need for a resolution. The Wall Street Journal focuses on the harrowing search for safety faced by Palestinians as the war intensifies. The fear of losing their land and being displaced again adds another layer of complexity to the already dire situation in Gaza. Reuters informs us that the World Health Organization will hold an emergency session to discuss the health conditions in Gaza and the West Bank. The aim is to empower the WHO and call on Israel to not target the medical sector, allowing for the provision of much-needed medical supplies. Lastly, Reuters reports on Israeli authorities investigating possible insider trading related to a Hamas attack on October 7. This raises serious questions about the potential profiteering from tragic events and the need for a thorough investigation. So, my dear viewers, we have covered a wide range of news stories that highlight the complexities and consequences of the ongoing conflict between Hamas and Israel. The situation calls for a coordinated and comprehensive approach from the Arab states, as well as the international community, to achieve a lasting and just resolution. It is crucial to prioritize the well-being of civilians and address the root causes of the conflict. Now, I invite you, my astute audience, to share your thoughts and questions. What are your ideas on how to bring about peace and stability in the region? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.